Hey everyone, I'm Rona Spiegel, and I'm here to speak to you today about cyber risk management as applied to operational transformation. So, the introduction of frontier technologies is breeding fear of missing out for technologists, businesses, and end users alike. Organizations are increasingly experiencing pressure to adopt quickly so as not to fall behind and to remain relevant and competitive. These are exciting times where what is possible is refreshed and renewed, but can also be stressful as management and workforce alike find themselves often in contradictory situations. The expectation is to deliver on responsibilities and stay the course, while the directive is also to embrace change and be willing to pivot to take advantage of disruptive innovation. Leaders struggle under this pressure to execute on transformation and take risks to drive growth and gain competitive advantage. By definition, taking risk introduces risk. Some of this risk is overt, some is implied, some is obscured. Some can surprise us since there's so much unknown contained in the unknown. We're living in a time where technology, business models, and policy are evolving concurrently, interdependently, and at a rapid pace, often intersecting and colliding in ways that are difficult to predict and plan for, while developing roadmaps for execution to drive change. This is compounded by social media, influencers, and customers who demand feature-rich services that embrace all new advances. At the same time, the threat landscape is evolving at the same rate or faster. New threat vectors and more efficient and effective attacks are also enabled by each new technological advancement. If we as cyber risk professionals merely chase transformation, then we'll never catch up, and the enterprise will be surprised by new attack vectors which will at best slow down transformation, undermining execution, and at worst, suffer a blindsiding blow. After all, cyber risk is business risk. Data loss is customer loss. Denial of service is terrible customer experience. How do we define and execute a strategy that embraces transformation technology with a risk-aware mindset and without inhibiting progress and agility? How do we strike the right balance? Well, I've taken some risks in my life. 30 years ago, I drove across the country to California in search of a new life. I wanted to immerse myself in the heart of media and technology. I left everything behind and moved to this sunny center of creativity and innovation. I did not expect to build an independent studio. I did not expect to participate in the big digitization of big tech's media and communications industries, nor did I know I'd be supporting the migration of a generation of sound designers to adopt new digital tools for film production. I didn't expect to embrace corporate life, nor to build user experience and cloud modernization capabilities and practices. These were all very pleasant surprises, but I did take some hits along the way. Surely I did not know what I did not know. I'd like to tell you I did all of this with a keen, risk-aware mindset, but really it was with feelings of wonder, a very small budget, the kindness of strangers, and frankly, not much to lose at that time. But looking back, this is how I learned the importance of managing risk, and knowing then what I know now, I would have done it all again, but with more to lose and more to gain. For with the application of a risk mindset, one can enable innovation more efficiently and more productively and with more predictable results. Because change happens whether you stay still or not. Leaders are responsible for driving sustainable growth, which means calibrating risk and prioritizing investments. This often creates a self-inflicted conflict between playing it safe and moving quickly. I have seen organizations where this leads to paralysis, internal strife, finger pointing, none of which is necessary. A proper and effective risk-aware transformation strategy will bring into view what is of value to the organization, where change might expose these assets, and a measured approach toward proactively implementing guardrails that will mitigate these risks along the way. This approach is not all that difficult to bring to the table. If it sounds daunting, then rest assured that you can go as deep as you see fit, and simply thinking about these risks in this manner will bring them to the surface and make them visible for all stakeholders to consider in order to make informed decisions about how to proceed. Start with why. Ask yourself many questions and shop them around the organization. Why are we adopting this new technology? No, really, why? Why are we doing it? Are we looking to become more competitive, more productive? Is this a market differentiator? Does it solve a specific problem that we previously identified? Does it fulfill a regulatory obligation? Did a customer ask for it? There are many possibilities, and do approach this with sincere inquisitiveness. The purpose of this exercise is not to contradict your organization's prime objective or priorities, but to understand them truly and deeply. If you want to be able to assess risk, then you need to know your true why. What outcomes do we seek? What does the before and after picture look like? How big is this change? How dramatic is the end result expected to be? How do we implement this to achieve our goals? What is it going to take to make it happen? What's the timeline? Have the dependencies been identified? Is it a staged plan for transformation? Is it iterative? Has there been an impact assessment done? Do we need to do one? Again, not to be combative, not an inquisition. This is introspection, an opportunity to gather information and conduct a risk assessment as early in the transformation cycle as possible, because chasing the pain is no fun at all. Your goal is to identify risks, prioritize them, and assess potential opportunities to offset them, else mindfully avoid or accept them, and all the nuances in between. How do we know if we're successful? What are our success metrics? How will we be able to measure and confirm that projected outcomes have been achieved? Will the transformation improve sales, cost of goods sold, revenue, productivity, margin? These are standard business case and product management concepts, and there's a lot of information out there in the world about how to approach these problems. But the risk perspective is that the investment in risk management must be looked at in the context of the transformation being undertaken. Most of you as cybersecurity professionals will not need to answer these questions on your own. Someone, whether it be the board of directors, head of operations, product management, transformation office, should be able to answer them for you. But it's very important that you level set. You need to understand the before and after expectations to be able to assess risk meaningfully and to be able to communicate the impact of the transformation on the risk profile of your organization. Time to ask yourself and your collaborators more questions. Now that you understand the why and what the undertaking might look like, what will be touched, and how the ecosystem is expected to change, best to revisit your threat model. Or if you don't have one to revisit, then it's time to create one. Again, it does not need to be an overwhelming undertaking. What's important is your mindset, but this is a great opportunity for whiteboarding and a team building exercise, preferably with lunch included. If you're going to figure out what kind of risks could be introduced and how to adapt, that means looking for what could go differently, wrongly, or otherwise. There are some great threat modeling methodologies out there and lots of public documentation available. STRIDE and PASTA are the most common ones out there. The acronyms decoded give you a pretty good idea of where they fit. STRIDE covers spoofing, tampering, repudiation, information disclosure, denial of service, elevation of privilege. This is a very system-focused approach and is great for designing, adopting, implementing, or extending an application or tool. We use this to establish design in depth principles for our LLM Canary test tool. It's a great framework to start with, as it positions you for covering the most common threats and align more easily with standard controls frameworks down the road. PASTA, or Process for Attack, Simulation, and Threat Analysis, comprehensive framework for assessing your product security in terms of your business strategy. Thus, this is an excellent way to think about how a major transformation, such as migrating to public cloud, enabling AI, implementing a new monitoring tool, and such, might impact your ecosystem. I also want to share Brooks. What I like most about Brooks Schoenfeld's approach is that you can start anywhere and migrate to different positions. It's open and collaborative and can serve as an icebreaker with teams that are just dipping their toes into the water. Whatever method you choose, when undergoing a transformation, review your threat model. It'll help you focus on the potential implications of the change and what threats should be further examined. So by now, you should have an idea of what potential incremental threats could rear their ugly heads as a result of this transformation. Let's say you're migrating to a new cloud-hosted ERP system. You've identified threats in the previous step that include access management, data privacy, or system availability. You may have a very wide range of potential future state exposures to process. The next step is not to panic. The next step is to prioritize the threats and their potential impact on your organization and produce a qualitative risk analysis first. This will help you categorize the threats, wrap your head around potential impact on the organization, and understand which ones to tackle first. I recommend this initial activity be conducted by a smaller team or individual at first, so you can be more productive, move quickly, and then you can bring a straw man to socialize it across the stakeholder community and build on that. It'll be iterative. And even after you land on an agreed mapping, you'll want to revisit it periodically, perhaps every 6 months. The key here is to agree on the definition of low, medium, and high for both likelihood and impact. For instance, if the threat is a denial of service attack causing an outage, then the impact could be customer access, and potentially revenue loss. For this exercise, you want to think more subjectively about the company mission, key priorities, as well as the stated goals of the transformation. Customer access is likely a high priority risk, in which case the impact of that threat would be high on the impact axis. The likelihood would need to be assessed, and you may need to gather some data, say, from your vendor producing that service to confirm your assumptions. So if the impact was high and the likelihood was low-medium in this case, then the threat would sit around medium-high. You may need to get creative to solve for some of these threats. Establish and document a guide with agreed thresholds for high, medium, and low for each access, and check each threat against it, rinse and repeat as needed. Okay. Now, quantitative risk. We've covered and validated with key stakeholders what you've projected to be the most likely and impactful threats to the organization as a result of implementing this transformative change initiative. Again, no reason to panic. Just keep swimming. Risk management is not about halting or squelching transformation. It's about continuously identifying, raising, and managing the potential risks associated with the transformation, and exploring, sizing, and implementing mitigation techniques along the way. To stick with the metaphor, it should perform like a shark cage. Transformation, operational scaling, new product development concepts all begin with a business case. In order to effectively produce cybersecurity risk mitigation tactics, you will need to learn to speak this language. That means calculating the annualized loss expectancy in the event that these top threats are realized. You'll need to estimate asset value. What is it that's at risk of loss? How much of it is at stake in the event of a breach? And how often might it happen? Richard Searson is a guru on this topic if you want to delve more deeply. I've got one of his books right here. You can definitely keep this simple as long as you're prepared to show why the dollar amount is at risk and then what it will cost to guard against it. Don't allow yourself to be overwhelmed by all these threats. If you conduct a qualitative analysis first, then you'll have identified the high risks. That means high likelihood and high impact combined. Go after that big fish first. Sometimes a cultural shift is needed. More evolved and often highly regulated organizations should provide cyber risk management a seat at the table, even better at the board level, but not all organizations are thinking in this direction just yet. This is how, as cyber risk management leaders, we can influence the industry by collaborating with stakeholders and enabling transformation. Risk mitigation does not need to taste like medicine. Our jobs are to proactively ease these controls and guardrails into the landscape of opportunity with the same approach toward prioritization as the key outcomes and benefits driving your transformative journey. Yes, this can be iterative, and I will repeat that change happens when you're standing still. So even if you think you got everything, you did not. There will be more. So go after the big fish first to offset loss. Also remember that if the cost to mitigate the risk outweighs what you're protecting, then it may not be a strong business case for investment. That's also a very good way to litmus test your strategy. If you've identified a critical baseline tool and the cost does not add up against the value of what you're protecting per your assessment, then you may need to explore an interim or alternate solution. Alternatively, the value of your assets may not be fully accounted for. Take another look and iterate through the process. Approach your mitigation strategy holistically and collaborate cross-functionally with stakeholders as often as possible. There are often ways to leverage existing tools, processes, and controls to achieve related objectives. Be diligent about retiring those you've outgrown. The biggest innovation inhibitor I have found throughout my career is when an organization is bogged down by layer upon layer of controls and processes that are outdated and no longer effective. Leverage control standards such as those available through NIST and CIS. Look for opportunities to embed these guardrails into your software development lifecycle and automate where it makes sense to do so. Designing and implementing automation of controls can sometimes slow down transformation implementation. So if you can test those controls manually, scale them with automation once they've been proven to be effective, that can be more of an agile approach and can also win points with your partners. Cyber risk, especially those associated with the newest of technologies, has taken over news headlines. Businesses, governments, and customers are increasingly concerned about the security of systems, infrastructure, and data. Software companies deliver services that are increasingly automated and integrated into the customer's technologies, tools, and processes. Last year, the SEC expanded rulings pertaining to cybersecurity disclosures, specifically calling out third-party risk. Procurement now demands transparency of cyber risk management practices in contracts. This is no longer just simply the cost of doing business. It's being designed for competitive advantage and market differentiation. So as you approach the drop-off, take note of your surroundings, assess your potential threats, and face them head on. It's all part of the journey. So thank you, and I'm available for questions if there are any.